The glittering chandeliers of the assembly hall cast their glow over the whirling dancers and murmuring onlookers. Miss Rebecca Fairchild had attended many such events and found them equally tedious each time. She sighed, her gloved fingers fidgeting with the fringe of her fan, as her friend, Miss Charlotte Woodley, prattled on about some gentleman's dashing cravat. "Miss Fairchild?" a voice interrupted, as Rebecca turned to see an impeccably dressed young man bowing before her. Mr. Henry Radcliffe was the sort of man whose polished boots seemed to outshine his personality. Nevertheless, he held out his hand with the air of someone accustomed to obliging women. Quote, "May I have this dance?" he asked. Rebecca hesitated, but the weight of social expectation pressed heavily upon her. Smiling faintly, she accepted his hand, and they joined the dancers. As the music began, Rebecca realized her partner was not only as haughty as she had feared, but also possessed an irksome tendency to smirk at his own cleverness. For his part, Henry found Rebecca's wit a touch too sharp for his liking, and her polite reserve bordering on cold indifference. "You appear to have a great command of the steps, Miss Fairchild," Henry remarked as they turned through the figures. "Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe. I can only aspire to match your talent for conversation," Rebecca replied, her tone betraying her mild sarcasm. The remainder of the dance passed in a similar fashion, each silently vowing to avoid the other at all costs. However, fate had other plans. Later that evening, Rebecca's mother approached her with an uncharacteristically gleeful expression. "My dear, you will never guess who I have seen after all these years," she exclaimed. "Colonel Radcliffe, your father's old friend from the regiment. And, oh, Rebecca, you must meet his son, such a fine young man. I believe you danced with him tonight." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "Mr. Radcliffe is the colonel's son?" "Indeed, and such a delightful coincidence. Colonel Radcliffe and your father have long hoped that their children might— well, it is too early to speak of such things, but—" Her mother's wink was both conspiratorial and horrifying. When Rebecca relayed this revelation to her father, his face lit up with fond nostalgia. Quote, "Ah, young Henry, Pocket. The boy was but a lad when I last saw him. His father and I faced cannon fire together, Rebecca. You cannot comprehend the bond of such comradeship. It's only fitting that our families unite." Meanwhile, Henry's evening took a similar turn as his father recounted tales of valor and loyalty, emphasizing the providential nature of their children's meeting. "Miss Fairchild is precisely the sort of lady you ought to marry, Henry," Colonel Radcliffe declared. "I dare say it is destiny." Destiny, as it turned out, had other ideas. When Rebecca and Henry discovered their parents' shared ambitions, they resolved to thwart them. Their agreement was unspoken but undeniable. Under no circumstances would they bow to the whims of their well-meaning but meddlesome parents. Their first act of defiance involved a deliberate display of disinterest during a family tea arranged by their mothers. Rebecca, with her most aloof demeanor, offered clipped responses to Henry's remarks. Henry, in turn, expounded on the weather with such tedious thoroughness that even the teapot seemed to droop in despair. "They are shy," Mrs. Fairchild whispered to Mrs. Radcliffe, beaming with maternal pride. "How charming," Mrs. Radcliffe agreed. Frustrated by their failure, Rebecca and Henry escalated their efforts. During a picnic, Henry feigned clumsiness and spilled a glass of lemonade on Rebecca's bonnet. Rebecca retaliated by inadvertently leading him into a patch of nettles during a nature walk. Still, their parents remained undeterred. Plans for a betrothal grew increasingly elaborate, culminating in a dinner party that both Rebecca and Henry vowed to ruin. Their scheme involved a series of minor catastrophes. Rebecca enlisted her younger brother to accidentally release a mischievous terrier during dessert, while Henry ensured the seating arrangement placed the most quarrelsome guests side by side. Yet, amidst the chaos of barking dogs and bickering relatives, Rebecca found herself laughing with Henry, their shared amusement momentarily dissolving their animosity. "It seems we are equally inept saboteurs," Henry remarked, his smile unexpectedly genuine. "Perhaps," Rebecca conceded, her heart softening ever so slightly. As the weeks passed, their battles took on a playful quality. Rebecca began to notice the warmth in Henry's laughter and the sincerity behind his gestures. Henry, for his part, found himself enchanted by Rebecca's quick wit and unyielding spirit. One afternoon, while strolling through the gardens, Henry turned to Rebecca with an uncharacteristic earnestness. Miss Fairchild, may I speak frankly? By all means, Mr. Radcliffe, she replied, though her pulse quickened. I find myself in a predicament, he began. Despite my best efforts to resist, I have grown fond of you. More than fond, in truth. I cannot imagine a future without you in it. Rebecca's breath caught as he continued, his voice tinged with vulnerability. Could you ever consider marrying me? Not for our parents' sake, but for ours? Her silence stretched, and Henry's confidence faltered. I realize I am not the most agreeable companion, but... Yes, Rebecca interrupted, her cheeks flushed. Yes, Mr. Radcliffe, I would. Their shared confession transformed their once contentious relationship into one of profound affection. Yet, when their parents gathered to formally apologize for their meddling and release them from the obligation of marriage, Rebecca and Henry exchanged amused glances. Actually, Henry began, taking Rebecca's hand in his, we were hoping the wedding plans might continue. The astonished parents could scarcely believe their ears, but their joy was unmistakable. As the wedding day approached, Rebecca and Henry's love deepened, their bond forged through laughter, resilience, and a shared appreciation for life's absurdities. When they finally stood together before the altar, their vows carried the weight of their journey, from reluctant acquaintances to kindred spirits. And as the assembled guests cheered, Rebecca and Henry knew that their union, born of defiance and nurtured by love, was destined to bring happiness to all who witnessed it.